So welcome everyone to the Credential Engine co-design webinar for the purpose of co-designing partner roadmap guides for implementing the CTDL. I want to thank all of you for volunteering to take this little extra step in addition to selecting your credentials that we've already entered into the editor, because what we want to be able to do is by June have a clear path with minimal barriers, and challenges for partners to basically be able to implement the CTDL technologies. And so, namely, we'll talk about the credential transparency description language, CTDL, and the credential registry. So to accomplish that, Jeannie Kitchens with SIU Center for Workforce Development, one of the Credential Engine team members, and Stuart Sutton, who's also on, and we'll hold off on those introductions when we get to the next part of the agenda. Stuart can introduce himself, as well as some other team members who are on the webinar as well. But we'll be the two main presenters today. We have other team members who can answer questions as well if any questions come up. While we're making this presentation, we want it to be interactive, so you can feel free to ask questions at any time. You can use the chat at any time to make comments or ask questions, and then you can also speak. We'll pause throughout the webinar. We'll try to make time at the end as well. And at the conclusion, if there's any open questions, we'll, of course, follow up with everyone. So what I want to do is give you a really quick update on where things are with the Credential Engine. We're going to do welcome and introductions, where we are now, the goal of the co-designing project, and then we'll move on to, Stuart will talk about the partner inventorying of data, partner crosswalking of data to CTDL, and then we'll talk about our next steps together in this process. So just as a really quick update on the Credential Engine. So the Credential Engine formed, it's a nonprofit organization, and the Credential Engine website is now live. Probably additional information will be added to the website over time, but you can learn about the 501c3. You can see who the board members are. You can see all of the advisory groups and advisory group members. And you could also subscribe to receive updates from the website on news, events, and resources as they're added to the Credential Engine website. So this is really great news, that it means that all this work that we're all doing together, will continue beyond the end of the project, which is, this year. So all of us working on the project are now working under the umbrella of the Credential Engine. So let me go ahead and move on to the introductions. And what I'd like to do is give everyone a chance to introduce themselves and just give us a couple pieces of information, who you are, the organization that you're with the credentialing partners that we have listed here, and just tell us a little bit about your organization and just what your goal is, how you see the CTDL as benefit to your organization and your community. And the team, the CE, or the Credential Engine team, will introduce themselves as well. So let me go about it this way. Let me ask the Credential Engine team members, and I'll start with Stuart and ask him to introduce himself. As I said, he will be co-presenting the webinar today with me. And then the other team members, go ahead and please introduce yourselves and just tell everybody hello and what your role is. Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Stuart Sutton. I am a emeritus professor at the University of Washington in the Information School. I'm also the managing director of the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative, which has been around for about 20 years and is widely used on the open web. And I'm working with the team on the metadata and the schemas, for example, the CTDL that we'll be looking at and that you'll be working with in the coming months as this work progresses. That's it.
Thanks, Stuart. And then I see we have Nate on. Nate, say hello to everyone.
Hey everyone, I'm Nate Argo. I work with the team on the CTDL stuff. I do some more of the technical side of things with the websites and whatnot, primarily, but I've also helped kind of with the schema itself.
Yeah, Nate kind of does a little bit of everything. He did a lot of work on the CTDL and a lot of work on the Search App prototype and the editor that all the partners have access to. And then Scarlett, introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, this is Scarlett Van Stuckelman and I work here with Jeannie at SIU. I've been doing a lot of inputting the credential information into our search application and doing a lot of the back end kind of things.
Thanks, Scarlett. And I see Bob Sheets is on. Bob, do you have audio?
Yes, I do.
Good. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Bob Sheets, and I'm with the Credential Engine Interim Management Team working with the project. And thank you so much for everybody joining on in this pilot work.
Thank you, Bob. I see we have a couple more team members in there. Mike Parsons, are you on?
Right, my mic is on. Yes, yes, Michael Parsons. I've been working on the CTI project as well as other projects with SIUC. Been doing primarily database side, mid-tier design, working a little bit on the client, more on the client side now. I'm working with Nate.
Thanks, Mike. And then I see we also have Emily. Emily, do you have sound?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Raffel. I'm also at GW with Bob, and I have been doing a lot of the same work that Scarlett's been doing, working with our partners to get their information on the registry, as well as other various projects within Credential Engine.
Thanks, Emily. I think that's it for the Credential Engine team members that are on this webinar today. And we do a lot of webinars, you know, with the partners, and we don't usually have time on our packed agendas to do introductions. So next, I want to ask all of the partners who have joined the webinar to introduce themselves. You can do it as a team if you like. You know, tell us which organization you're with, a little bit about it, and what your goals are with the Credential Engine. And the other reason that I wanted to make sure the Credential Engine team introduced themselves to everyone is so that you know that we're all accessible to you throughout this process. So throughout this webinar, if you have any questions for anyone that on the Credential Engine team specifically that you want to ask questions, you feel free to do so. And know that we're all accessible to you. So let's do it this way. Let's just go in alphabetical order down the left side of the PowerPoint slide. And can I ask the team with the Board of Certified Safety Professionals to go ahead and introduce themselves? Are you, make sure you have audio.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi.
Hi there. We are the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, a not-for-profit organization that sets the technical criteria and provides credentials in the safety, health, and environmental areas. We have 7 different credentials that we offer, and we want to make sure that as this Credential Engine project goes forward, that it's not strictly geared toward educational institutions, but also the private sector and the not-for-profit sector.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we appreciate your participation. As you said, it's very important that we're working with all types of credentialing organizations and all types of credentials. So very good points. And let me move on to Brandman.
Hi, Jeannie. This is Lori Dodge. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you. Good to hear your voice.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you. I'm Lori Dodge, and I'm serving as Vice Provost and Vice Chancellor at Brandman University. We're a university that serve adult students, first-generation students. We're also a Hispanic-serving institution. We're very interested in participating with the Credential engine, and our focus is our competency-based education program. We have 2 degree programs, but for this project, first starting with the Bachelor of Science in Information Technology, which is a full CBE direct assessment program that also has the general education and the emphasis areas, as well as a badging constellation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lori. And do we have Capella University on?
Hey, Jeannie, this is Jeff Gran calling in with Capella. I work as our Academic Director Assessment Learning Analytics, and have been a big fan of CTI right from the start. I think it's so important. Like Brian, we offer competency-based programming. We have some direct assessment offerings. We're fully online. We serve graduate students as well, and so that might be a unique attribute of our credentials. Much interested in how to expose the good curricular design work our university has been working on for a long time to students in a consistent and regular way through the registry. So really happy to be a co-design partner with you guys.
Well, thank you.
Nick, are you on the call as well? Would you mind saying hello?
I see we have a Nick White that joined the meeting. And if you're talking, we do not hear you. Oh, Nick is going to type.
Okay. Well, Nick's a great asset involved in a lot of a lot of our programming and technology staff.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to Ivy Tech Community College. I'm getting some little weird reverb thing going here. If who is on with Ivy Tech? Not hearing Ivy Tech. Let's just go ahead and move forward, and then we'll. Oh, Pam with Ivy Tech. I'll try to dial in. Thanks, Pam. Yes, if you could just go ahead and call, Scarlett put the number in there, and I'll move on to Madison while you call in, and then we'll circle back to Ivy. Madison Area Technical College, are you on?
Hi, this is Leslie Boyd. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Leslie. Thanks for joining.
Hi, yes, thank you for having us. I'm here from Madison College. It's possible we have a few other people on the line, but we're a little double booked today, so I'm representing all of us, I think. We are offering credentials mostly through this right now through our CE, our continuing ed programs, but we've also kind of entered in our STEM program, which is credit bearing, but currently is kind of a mini certification within a degree program. All of our continuing ed classes that we are inputting into this are badged, so we are offering these to mostly adult learners, a lot of whom have post-secondary and some terminal degrees. They're all competency-based, which is how they're getting badged, and considered our professional development style courses.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Let me go back to Ivy Tech and see if Pam was able to go ahead and call in.
Oh, my apologies for that delay. Thank you.
Oh, no worries at all. Thanks, Pam.
Ivy Tech is can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Are we good? Okay, thank you. Ivy Tech is a statewide community college system, serves all of Indiana. We're a 2-year community college. We do offer an associate's degree. Then right below that is another offering, a technical certificate, which can be 18 to 21 credit hours. And then below that is a certificate, which is the certification embedded program, and that is about 18 hours or so. And to work with the Credential Engine, we have offered up first 3 of those CTs, the lower credit level of about 18 hours. It's a great opportunity. I think this is a really neat chance for everyone to learn and be able to access the same information. And so we're starting, and I'm learning as we go, but we're starting with listing those 3 certificates that have a certification embedded in them, and then we'll be adding to those as we go. But these are very, very much aligned with our workforce demand, and a way to help students gain a certification, be ready to enter the job market in a very short, effective period of time with a strong skill set. So that's those are the things that we're going to be promoting first, and I appreciate learning more as we go through the process.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Pam. Stanford University they were unable to participate today, but they did provide an introduction that they asked me to read, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to Thomas Edison. So Helen Chen is the Director of ePortfolio Initiatives, and Mi Hung is the Associate Developer. Both are with the Office of the Registrar, and so they are representing Stanford University. They're interested in broader issues related to the question, how can the spectrum of learning, educational success, capacities, and skills that are produced by a 21st century liberal education be effectively documented and communicated to diverse stakeholders? So the learning representation ecosystem is around degrees, certificates, as well as new forms of recognition, including competency-based badges, micro degrees, stackable credentials, is evolving with higher education and in the workplace. So instead of devising new forms of credentials, Stanford's Office of the Registrar has focused on enhancing and strengthening a currency that has established credibility within the academic ecosystem, the certificate. So they wanted everyone to know about their interests, how they're seeing the ecosystem, and they also wanted me to mention that Stanford has participated in the ACRO, AACRAO, another acronym, NASPA Comprehensive Student Record Project as well, and so they're eager to see how the work from that project will continue to develop and become scalable and sustainable. And they're interested in contributing to and learning from the Credential Engine. And the mention of the ACRO project is good because one of our goals with the Credential Engine technical side is to harmonize across the many different initiatives going on in the US. And let me go ahead and move on to Thomas Edison. Is Thomas Edison University on? Not getting any sound. Want to make sure that someone's on with Thomas Edison, and we'll circle back, but we'll go ahead and move on to University of Wisconsin Extension.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Kite. I'm the Assistant Dean in the Continuing Education Outreach and E-Learning Division, and I'm also joined with all of you today by Andrea Joe. She's our IT Director. We are really pleased to be engaged with the Credential Engine project from 2 perspectives. One is the University Learning Store, which is a non-credit kind of store, if you will, that's a conglomeration of a number of institutions across the country. One particular certificate program is being put into the Credential Engine in the area of project management. That is a non-credit offering that does have badging associated with it. Our other project that we're representing in the Credential Engine is our Bachelor of Science in Business Administration program from the University of Wisconsin Extension. That is an undergraduate credit program. Both the Learning Store and the BSBA are competency-based education format, so both offerings will be represented from the CBE space. Like Stanford, we did also participate in the ACRO-NASPA project. I thought maybe Brandon did as well, and we're really interested to see how those two projects might, the ACRO-NASPA and the Credential Engine project, might build on one another. And then additionally, we've also been involved in the IMS Global Digital Credentialing project. So we're very interested to see how all of these things might tie together for the student. The audience we're trying to serve is largely the adult student population, although not exclusively. The University Learning Store could appeal to anyone in a broad view that might be looking to strengthen work skill credentials, and that could be somebody that's a currently enrolled undergraduate of any age, or somebody who is currently in the workforce looking to tool up, or somebody coming back in or changing gears that's been away for a while.
Great, thank you for sharing that information with us and for mentioning IMS Global as well. And again, that's another example of just kind of trying to harmonize across all of the different initiatives and standards bodies, such as IMS Global. And IMS Global is a member of the Technical Advisory Committee. So thank you very much, and I'll move on to Western Association of Food Chains. Do we have someone on from Western?
Hi, this is Cherie. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hey. So, hi, my name is Cherie Phipps, and I'm representing the Western Association of Food Chains. But to clarify, the Western Association of Food Chains is a nonprofit organization that's made up of retailers and wholesalers across the U.S. that represents about $200 billion in annual sales. Their primary mission is to advance the food industry through education and leadership. And about 17 years ago, they began funding the development of an 8-course retail management certificate program. It is a community college accredited program that is now available at about 160 community colleges like Ivy Tech and Madison Area Tech across the nation. It's the exact same courses at all approved campuses. It is competency-based, and it has been vetted, and we've involved industrial psychologists to identify the competencies that are considered critical for people to be successful as they move along a career pathway in retail. So even though the Western Association of Food Chains is the owner, if you will, of the credential, that is primarily to maintain the courses in the structure, but it is now recognized nationwide by other groups such as the Food Marketing Institute, the National Grocers Association, and we're working with NRF and Walmart Foundation and several other groups to build greater awareness and enrollment in the retail management certificate across the nation, adding new community colleges all the time from here to Maine is my latest.
Great.
Our objective with the Credential Engine obviously is to maintain the certificate in a place that when people are Googling and looking at education that they might attain that might help them in retail, that this would become one of the first they would look at. The partnership with the community colleges is vital because it's so affordable, and people who work in retail need that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And, really great point you made about the whole, this whole project leading to being able to easily find and connect to these great credentials such as yours. So thanks for bringing that up. It appears that the Thomas Edison representative was not able to make it, so we'll make sure that we follow up with Thomas Edison after the webinar. But great turnout today, so thanks everyone for joining. Let me go ahead and move on, and let's just talk real quickly about how it works now, and then we're going to segue to Stuart diving more into the next steps with the co-design process. So I hope all of you have seen this before, and it's merely a reminder, but for those who may be new and may not have seen this, this is a visual of the current process. And so our current process is we're using the Credential Transparency Description Language. That's a metadata infrastructure. It was released officially on November 17th, 2016, so just a couple of months ago. And actually there is a update to it, a release coming out tomorrow as well. And so the CTDL is a completely openly licensed infrastructure that anyone can use. And it is set up to evolve. So we got an initial release out, and we expect to update the CTDL throughout the year based on a feedback process. We use the CTDL editor, and some of you would have accounts and have logged in to look at that. And the CTDL editor essentially is taking the information from the partnered websites that either you've provided to us or that we found on the website, and we basically convert that information into the CTDL. So it transforms the information to the metadata infrastructure and then publishes it to the Credential Engine registry, the registry acting as a repository and a set of services. So for example, when we get to the point where we're talking about how we want to be able to push and pull information, basically from the internet, from your websites, one of those services could be harvesting, in addition to the API available for pushing directly to the registry. And then we have the Work It app. It's a search app prototype that each of the partners has access to see what their credentials look like based on the CTDL. And so the idea is to demonstrate in a somewhat consumer-friendly way, although initially we're really trying to include all of the information that we possibly can from the CTDL. And so one of the main reasons now for the Work It app and the way the information is displayed is for partners to be able to see all of it and get a good feel for it and make sure it is correct. And then the partners providing feedback. And so that's been essential throughout the entire process, as it continues with going toward an implementation. So just really briefly on the editor, because for those of you who are familiar with the search app prototype and have looked at this thing that we call the editor, you would know that basically we're taking information from your websites or even PDF documents, array of sources that you've provided that are public information, not private information, and we're essentially atomizing it, and we're matching it up to the CTDL and then kind of spitting it out in the format of the CTDL. We just completely updated the editor to match up to the release that will go out tomorrow. And so it's been updated. It has a little bit different presentation. And if anyone on this webinar today does not have a login to it, you can let us know afterwards, or you can put a note on the chat and we will make sure that you have access to your credentials. I want to bring it up because you're going to see a lot of similarities to the editor and the process that Stuart is going to talk about. And so while we're working together on this co-design, we want to think about how much we can automate the processes on your side, on the partner side, to make the make your information available, as prescribed by the CTDL. So how can we use these tools that we've been developing on down the road to alleviate barriers? Currently, the editor includes all of the CTDL classes, properties, concept schemes, and controlled vocabularies. And as I said, it emulates atomizing the partner's online content. All of you, when you access that editor, you should see your information in the Work It Search App prototype, and you're going to see your credential information, your organization information, and related learning opportunity and or assessment information, depending on what's pertinent to your organization and your credential. So that is where we are now. And again, if there's anyone on this webinar that's saying, oh, well, I don't have access to log in and see that, let us know. I do know every organization has a team of people or a minimum of one person who has a login to see all of that information in the app. So the goal is to move to not doing this kind of manual process that we've been doing to atomize the information and demonstrate it, but to have processes that become, far more automated, part of existing workflows and processes that push and pull to and from the registry. So in order to do that, we're going to move on to talking about how we can realize that goal, going through the process that Stuart is going to talk about next. So let me pause there, and while I pause, I'm going to move this out of the way. So Stuart, because I think you want to screen share directly from your desktop, so I'm going to move this little guy out of the way here. And while you're going ahead, Stuart, and getting your screen share queued up there, let me just see if anybody has any questions, either for any of the organizations that did introductions or on the, where we are now information that I just talked about. Go ahead and put your comments in the chat, or go ahead and talk. Okay, I did the 7-second wait.
Check on sound.
So I guess everyone is good to go. That's wonderful. And Joanne, thanks for joining. You're good to go. We're actually just getting into the PowerPoint, so you're fine. Thanks. Stuart, can you take it away?
Asking questions, I'll ask Jean to kind of just interrupt me. And of course, you're all welcome to just
I can hear you.
If you have questions. So as Jean said, basically the goal is for you to be able to take your credentialing information, your credential information, and information about related entities like your organization and competencies and related information, and to map them to the credential in the Credential Transparency Description Language, CTDL, so that, as we see here in step 4, it's there and available either to be pushed or pulled, as Jean just commented on, to the registry. Now, you may be wondering, as we move through the remainder of our time here this morning, exactly how what I'm going to be talking about relates to the editor that Jean was just talking about. An editor works great when you have a minimum number of credentials to enter and maintain their currency, because it's literally a manual process of entry. Many of you have too many credentials to do that sort of manual operation. So one of the goals is to assist people who have large numbers of credentials. Some, for example, community colleges can have them in, some in the hundreds of credentials that they need to encode or to map over to CTDL. But to provide them with the means of actually simply deploying out of their current data stores and mapping automatically, so that they can be, so that the original instantiation of their record in the Credential Engine Registry can be through a process that does not require an intervening editor. So the editor and the processes we're going to be talking about both serve extremely valuable processes, but they're sort of designed for different use cases. The quick, the one-time, one-off, or a limited number of credentials versus people who are looking at large numbers of credentials and need to map out. So what you're seeing on the screen here is an image that's kind of deliberately faded out of how we are going to take you through 4 steps, the last one having 2 parts, A and B, to go through 4 steps so that you can get your data down to set 4B, which is ready to be pushed or pulled to the Credential Engine Registry. Now, where we are right now is we're actually at step 2. Step 1 was a survey that Gene sent out that basically probed the nature of your credential data, like how is it exposed, and what, some background stuff on technology and so forth. So that step is, I don't think I can say it's complete. And Gene, you can jump in. I mean, there may be people who have not completed it. Still, it'd be great to complete that survey. But we're going to take now, having tried to focus through the survey people on the nature of their data, where it is, what technical form it's in, and so forth. We're now wanting to move to this analytic place, this analytic step of where you take your local data and analyze it, what you've got in terms of what you've got, and you map it to analog to similar concepts, similar properties and classes within the CTDL. So what this step that we're going to be on, it looks like close to 2 months, is basically doing an inventory of your data. What kinds of things do you say about your credentials? What do you say about yourself as an organization? And figuring out what those assertions about yourself are, what you're exposing on your website, and then mapping, after you establish those, mapping them to the CTDL. So today we're going to lay the foundation for being able to do this step 2. One thing is absolutely clear. We won't have enough time today to make all of it clear. So we've established communication channels. We have a Google group for this group for where questions can be asked and answered. And we can probe deeper into places where the documentation that we already have for you is not clear, because the goal here is to co-develop roadmaps for how to take people from step 2 down through step 4B. That's the goal. So today I'm going to work in 2 phases. One, the first is inventorying your data, describing credentials and their related entity types. So it's inventorying it and recording what you found. And then the second phase of the talk this morning will leave the PowerPoint and go out to our documentation to explore how you can take what you discovered in your inventorying, What things do you assert about your credentials? Name, a region of application, all of those things you say about your credentials. Then how do we crosswalk it over to the CTDL? And we will deploy spreadsheets in order for us to work through that process, each individually, however, doing it sort of in a cooperative space, where if people at one organization have problems, they feel perfectly free to bring it to the list and say, hey, you know, we can't figure out how to do this. And that's what we're for, is to make sure that by the time we're through, you're able to do that inventorying with a relative degree of confidence from your existing data through this crosswalk and into the CTDL types and properties. So that's the goal. So in part 2, we'll leave the PowerPoint and we'll jump out on the web and look at our documentation. So in the CTDL, there are a set of what I call key credentials and their related entity types. You see the credential there, and then above it is an agent. So, for example, your organization would be the agent that is offering that credential. So agent is one, and I'll talk a little more about the nature of that in a bit, and credential. And then we have this thing called condition profile that we won't engage with a lot right now, but that is where conditions are requirements, recommendations are expressed. And those are related to assessments and learning opportunities, requirements in terms of learning opportunities, requirements in terms of assessments, requirements in terms of entry requirements, prerequisite work, and so forth. And then the last key credentialing and related entity are competencies and competency frameworks. Now, those key entities at the top will use the CTDL description language for the mapping. So your data types for describing your organization, your data properties, fields, elements for describing credentials would be mapped to the CTDL. So all of the top part of these entities, assessment profile, learning opportunity, condition, credential, agents, all map to concepts and terms in the CTDL. Competencies, we will use a different description language. We will use the Achievement Standards Network description language. It's been around for about almost 20 years and is a robust way of describing competencies. So those are the key credential and related entity types that we'll be dealing with. And your data types flowing out of how you describe yourself as an organization, the offering organization, credential, and so forth, will be then mapped over the period of this time we're going to be working together over the next couple of months to the CTDL. And the same thing with competency frameworks, learning outcomes, goals, objectives, tasks, skills, and so forth. Those expressions will be mapped out to the ASN-DL. So that's where we're headed. Now, we've put together so far, in a way, as part of this assistance that will shore up this roadmap, certain documentation that is going to become very important, that the people doing the mapping from the inventory that you derive from what you're saying about your credentials and so forth, to the CTDL. There are some that are critical to defining what the CTDL is. So we're going to ask over a period of a few weeks that people become very familiar as they can with the available documentation on the CTDL. And there are two key documents at the moment. And when I go out on the web, we'll look at these individually. The CTDL term definitions tables These are the tables where we, with, I think, great precision, define the properties and classes that you will be mapping to. So coming to grips with the terms definition tables is going to be extremely important. To assist in that process, we do have a document called the CTDL Developer Guide. And again, I'll show you that as we move on. And it is a primer with narrative that talks about how the various entities, credentialing organizations, credentials themselves, learning opportunities, competencies are handled. And so it is kind of as humanly readable as technical documentation can get, I hope, is an easy way in. And in fact, I would recommend that people start with the developer guide, and the developer guide links out to the definition tables. Those are going to be critical to understanding how the CTDL describes credentials and related entities. Then there's also competencies and competency frameworks, and as I said, in this one we shift the vocabulary that we're using to the ASN, and there are 2 documents that are on the website that are useful in doing the mapping here. How you describe your competencies and map them to the ASN-DL. So there's the CTDL profile for ASN-DL, which looks a lot like the term definition tables for the CTDL. So it's the place where all of the properties and the 2 classes that are used here are described. And then there's a brief document on how the CTDL profile itself works. So those 4 pieces of documentation, and I'll show you where they are. They're all available from the drop-down menu on the technical website. Are going to be critical to the successful completion of that mapping of your data to the CTDL. Okay, so the developer guide, which I will get to in a bit, is divided up into fairly straightforward sections. There's a section for primary entities. These are things would be things like credentialing organization and the credentials themselves, learning opportunities assessments. They are accessible through information about how they work and what they are through the guide in section 2. Section 3, and we'll poke around in those a little later, are support classes. For example, cost profiles. You have a credential. What is its cost profile? Duration profiles. What are the time dependencies of the credential? Earnings profile. What are the statistical outcomes for earnings and employment? What jurisdictions is the credential applicable in? And are there exceptions? Process profile. Do you have publicly stated processes that you go through to develop and maintain your assets, the credentials, and so forth? Revocation profile is what processes are in place for revocation and verification. So those are supporting classes that support the primary classes. Then there are utility classes, which are in many ways kind of templates for how to describe certain things. So there's a geocoordinates one for describing longitude, latitude for locational stuff, postal address, contact points, and so forth. So those are utility classes. And starting with the developer guide and reading through how these relate to each other and looking at examples, I think, takes you a long way for being able to see how your data maps to the CTDL. So let me do the partnering inventory of the data. Now, recently, I guess today, you should have received, or someone on your team should have received an invite to a Google sheet, a Google spreadsheet. That's correct, isn't it, Jean? Am I speaking out of turn? Oh, oh, okay. And so your team will be working with this whole process of building the crosswalk will be done with a spreadsheet. And so what I want to do now is talk about how you're going to use, in the end, that spreadsheet to record your existing data around these key entities and so forth. So that's where we're going to head. And I want to talk a little bit about where to start and then show you an example of what I'm talking about. So what we're interested in here is currently public information. What do you say about your credentials and their related entities types on your website? What's the public information that's out there? On the website, in PDFs for credentials, related programs of study, about your organization currently. So we want an inventory of key data around what you're publicly saying. And also for you to look at currently non-disclosed data that might be under the hood. I mean, do you look for additional available data describing credential attributes and so forth that you're not currently making public that might be useful for stakeholders, and that you might include those too? So those are the two general places to start. And I'm going to use, I'm sorry, one other thing. Those sources of data basically fall into two buckets. And these two buckets are going to be ultimately very important in how you solve your problem. There are many organizations with credentials that do not use structured data. In other words, their credentials are described perhaps in static HTML pages that are managed by a staff, but they're not driven by an underlying content management system. They're literally hand done. Or there's PDFs that describe the credential and so forth. So, but that would be considered unstructured data. So there are people who will be filling in a spreadsheet who will not be able to look into underlying data stores to figure out what they're saying, but will have to pull that from what they are literally presenting through those static web pages and so forth. And I'll show you that in a moment. The other kind are structured data, and my assumption is that you've got lots of credentials. You're probably dealing with a data-driven website. That it's data-driven either out of document-oriented databases or table-oriented databases, and sometimes even offering an access API to get to the data of your credentials. Those are the two general buckets that organizations fall into. And then, of course, there are combinations where they may have some, that is being driven from a CMS and some that's not. So those two mechanisms are part of what we want to deal with in terms of the roadmap. How do people with unstructured data get there, and how do people with structured data get there? Because the goal is that they're both in the same place at the end, and that's that 4B on that chart I showed you, where your descriptions are ready for gathering or being pushed to the credential engine, registry engine. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. This is an example of my local community college, the Santa Rosa Junior College, and they have a raft of credentialing programs. And this one is of their dental assisting certificate. And so if I were beginning to look at this from the outside, or perhaps even by someone from the Santa Rosa Junior College who wants to do this analysis, I would look at what we're making public. So we've got a credential type, the certificate. I gather that, and so somewhere that data, that what is being described here is a certificate exists. Here it may be nothing more than an HTML page, or that data could be driven from a content management system underneath. At this point, we're not worried about where it's coming from so much as what is there. So on this, we can say, well, the Santa Rosa Junior College, there's a credential type, there's a name, and here the name, and that's what I put into my spreadsheet. The credential has a name. The CE terms name underneath it is actually a mapping point. That's a point in the CTDL where the name, this name element from the certificate maps. And I can go on. Data category, that got a little messed up. Units. We say stuff about units. We talk about the effective date of the credential. We talk about previous versions of the credential. We have a description of the credential. In my spreadsheet, I would record credential type units. That's actually should be category. Category, name, effective date, previous versions, description. And I can go on. Recommended learning opportunities. Here they recommend that students maybe take a couple of courses as prerequisite, but they're recommended. So in CTDL there is recommended for. So, but we would put into the spreadsheet that the Santa Rosa Junior College has a mechanism for recommending, for recommended learning opportunities, and required submissions. Students must provide documentation of health examinations, so there's required submissions, and there are places within the CTDL for capturing such requirements. Here's maintain GPA, which can be described using an additional condition in CTDL, and preferential admissions, criteria for preferential admissions, and contact point. So I would record in my spreadsheet all of the stuff you see in red. I would record that in my spreadsheet of what the Santa Rosa Junior College does for a credential. And I'll go on. Here we have learning outcomes. These are program level learning outcomes, and they are mapped in the CTDL to competency frameworks, because these fall into the definition of what we call a competency framework, or competency framework that is made up of a set of competencies, a licensure note, character notice, could be expressed as an additional condition through the CTDL. And I can go on, and I'll speed up here a little bit, but tuition, cost profile, there's a cost profile within the CTDL. Tuition is a type. Books and supplies, room and board, job placement statistics, graduate median debt, financial aid availability. So all of these things are things the Santa Rosa Junior College says about their credentials in the public space, and you can see from the black that almost all of them are straightforward to map to the CTDL. Again, these are continuing with the same dental assistant credential. There are required program conditions. And again, the conditions profile would capture this data. Required learning opportunities. Students are required to take Psych 1A. Required alternate learning opportunities. Again, learning opportunities and alternative learning opportunities. So the CTDL makes it possible to capture those relationships. Also, learning opportunities can be captured more specifically. Here, using the learning opportunity profile, which is not the full description of the course, but a profile of the courses. And this is, by the way, is simply the first course in the dental assisting requirements. Pass that again. So units and so forth. Lecture method, there's a way of expressing the mode of the method of the instruction, and then description and prerequisites. All can be captured and expressed, co-requisites. So now I want to shift gears. So that would be description of the credential. Notice in that description that there were embedded competencies at the program level. These are competencies at the course level that are part of that credential. In aggregate would be part of that credential. And so here we shift gears because we're describing a competency framework to the achievement standard network. So we have learning outcomes expressed and the category label learning outcomes. Then we have objectives expressed and the statement label for those. So we could express all of these course competencies through an ASN competency framework expression. So we would be mapping what we found on the Santa Rosa Junior College site to the ASN properties of classes to capture that. So that's basically the process. Now, if you're in a CMS-driven environment, you may not need to do that. You may be able to simply go to your schema and, what are we saying through our schema about credentials and about organizations and so forth. Because the goal then is to fill in this column with your elements, elements or properties or fields that are used to describe those aspects of here we're looking at the credentialing organization and QA credentialing organization. So we're looking at an organization here, and in the spreadsheet you were provided there is a tab for organizations. There's also a tab for the credential, a tab for assessments, a tab for learning opportunity, and you would simply be recording what you were finding under those various tabs, including the competency framework and cross-institutional conditions. For example, costs that are cross-institutional or cross-program, as opposed to individual costs that are tied to a specific credential. So you're able to do we'll capture here in the spreadsheet your cross-institutional conditions. And if you're working in a data-driven environment, you might then even correlate and record here where that data is located. I'll show you an example of this in just a moment. So the work of the next of this period of almost 2 months is to do the analysis of your data and data location if it's relevant, and then to move on to the second part, which is the CTDL property, and that's where the mapping occurs. And again, I've highlighted at the bottom of the spreadsheet the various tabs for discussing various parts. You'll know that there's some grade subdivisions. Those are relatively arbitrary. If your data has lots of other and you want to just throw into your spreadsheet, it's your spreadsheet, it's your working spreadsheet, you can throw in other subdivisions that they help you make sense of the environment. So that's basically the analysis of the existing data part, where you've come to some conclusions about what it is you say it publicly and what it is you want to map to the CTDL. And that takes you to the second piece. And I'm going to delve here for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to pop out to the to documentation. Sure. Oh, yeah. Oh.
Hey, Stuart, before jumping over to the next section, can we just stop for a sec and see that no Questions have come in the chat. Somebody did comment that they were starting to not be able to hear you. Maybe if you could move your microphone a little bit closer. Otherwise, let's give everyone a minute and see if anything, if anybody has any comments or questions on what you covered in that first part of the analysis.
You or whoever is going to work through this process, as you get into it, questions will arise. They will.
Well, it looks like
again,
everybody is good to go.
Post those questions to the forum that we've created for this team so that they can be answered. Because if you've got a question, if any of you have a question, I promise you that there's somebody else who also has that same question or didn't realize they had it until you asked it. So I really want you to use the forum as you begin to work with this to expose where the difficulties are and any issues, any questions around clarity or whatever. All right, so the partner data. So we're now ready to, having done the inventory, to do the crosswalk. And crosswalk is basically a record mapping of elements or properties from one data schema for an entity type to another data schema for that entity type. So it's just going from your schema, which you kind of roughly sketched out in the crosswalk spreadsheet, to the CTDL. The form of it is, as I said, tables or spreadsheets that take your local credential data elements, fields, and map or crosswalk those elements to the CTDL properties of classes. And the characteristics, and this one is really, I think, important. Crosswalks are never perfect. There's not always a one-to-one match between two schemas. In fact, I probably should phrase that differently and say there is never a one-to-one match between two schemas. So you may not have data properties that are present in the CTDL. CTDL is very large. You may not have properties. Not to worry. The CTDL may not have properties that are present in your data. In other words, you're saying things about your organization, you're saying things about your credential that are not covered. The value of getting that inventory is it will also help us expose where there may be need to further develop the CTDL. So it's quite natural that the CTDL may not provide data properties that are present in your data. There may be things that aren't there. And the same data you'll find in two schemas may take different forms. For example, in your schema, let's say it's a CMS-driven schema for a person, you have family name and given name, or first last name. Whereas CTDL may put them together into not put them into separate things. So there may be places where the data is there, but it's kind of expressed in different data structures. Those are the places where where we'll want to talk and work through how that should be handled. Here's a little brief example of a crosswalk that is complete. Not complete, sorry. It's incomplete. First, it's only of a credentialing organization, and I chose it because I think the properties and things, the attributes are pretty clear to most people. But it's certainly not complete. There would be one of these for organization, that would be one for credentials, using the other tabs of the spreadsheet. But here we see they went through their inventory, and that's column A. So for the organization, they got name, description, and they got location information in a field called street, city, state, country. And over on the far right is where that data is located in internal systems. So for example, if it was in a relational database management systems, these might be the tables that you'll find as the street field, city field, state field, so forth. In the center column, the CTDL property is the place where that property in column A, name, is mapped to a property in CTDL. And here there is an exact match, name to name, and the name is in the credential organization entity. And I'll show you at that in a moment. So it's a simple mapping. Notice in some places that things map may map to the same property. If we come down to line 22, we have Facebook URL, and it maps to social media, and so does LinkedIn. A LinkedIn URL maps to social media. So that's not unusual also, that there may be more than one data source on your side that maps to a single data source in the ASN. So just to give you a little idea, oops, suddenly I've had things drop out here. Well, here, let me go to this one first because it makes sense. This is the next slide, which is a competency framework mapping. And into describing competencies, the organization has a name, author, rights, audience description for the competency framework, which maps to the standard document entity in ASN to the field title. So that same apparatus of the ASN class that you see on the right, standard document dot title, ASN class, and the ASN property, should be able to do the same thing here, and somehow it's dropped out. That has postal address is the class in CTDL, and street address is the property within that class. So here we have a relatively maybe slim mapping of organization to the CTDL, and here again the data fields for describing competencies. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of this and go to the web. And tell me if this is large enough that you can see what's there. Is it okay? Well, I can, I'm full tilt high, that I can certainly go wider and bigger. Is that better?
Stuart, could you, I can see it okay, but I have a really big monitor. It looks like on your screen, and maybe you could pull your window up a little bit more.
Okay. So what I want to do now is just go over, because oh dear, I'm running over, aren't I, Jean?
Yes, and then for those that if it's not quite big enough, in the top right corner of the pod where you see that screen share, you can click on full screen as well.
At the beginning was broken into 4 pieces there, and all of them are accessible through the drop-down menu, CTDL guide, schema terms, and then drop down to CTDL profile for ASNDL and profile ASNDL how-to. So the guide looks like this. Again, I went over this a little bit. It's broken into these various sections, and then the terms, the actual CTDL language itself, is in this table, which is the schema terms. And in the schema terms, there's a set of shortcuts at the top, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to get through all of this. So let me make a fast comment. You know what, Jean? I think I will do a screencast that goes into these in greater depth that we can share with the. That actually takes time to go into these, and I can do that this weekend, and we can post it to the Google group. But what this table is comprised of, the description language itself,
Oh, that would be
are
great, actually.
a set of
Yeah.
classes. And here, for example, is Credential. Here is the Credential class, and the Credential class has a set of subclasses, including badge, certificate, certification, degree, diploma, license, micro, so forth. So the classes are all here, and you should do some exploring of the classes. These are the things that we describe. We describe associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, badges, and so forth. So becoming familiar with the classes is very, very useful. You can link to these classes, however, from the guide, which actually tells you more about it in narrative form. It talks about what they are. This is merely a reference mechanism to classes and properties, and then the classes are simply listed alphabetically, and each class is then described. And in the screencast that I'll prepare, I'll explain what all of these rows are in these various tables. So there's a set of classes, and then there are properties related to those classes. For example, here, this is really quite large on my screen. Here, for example, is the name property. Lots of things in the CTDL have a name. Certificates, badges, all of these things use the name property. So a bachelor's degree, in fact, has a name property. So this list is all of the things that can be said, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Excuse me. I'm a little flustered because I'm so far behind. I'm going to go back up to the top. So going through these classes, properties, concept schemes, concepts, and useful groups, I think will be very helpful in establishing where you would go to find specific kinds of information. For example, concept schemes are controlled vocabularies. We have a control vocabulary for describing agent sector. And if I click on agent sector, I see that there are three concepts in the agent sector vocabulary: private for public, private for nonprofit, and public in that control vocabulary. If we look at assessment method by artifact, exam, performance. So the CTDL has a range of control vocabularies that are used for values in properties. So there's concept schemes, and I'll go back up to the top one. And one thing that you might find very, very useful is this useful groups. And for example, I can click on agents and subclasses. So what are the kinds of agents? What kinds of organizations and so forth? We see that there's a credentialing organization, credentialing person that is under review at the moment, and quality assurance credential organization. So we, in essence, describe two kinds of organizations: credentialing organizations and quality assurance organizations. And I can find those clustered here in useful groups. Credential and subclasses. What are the kinds of credentials that the CTDL is useful in describing? And those are all clustered here under credential and subclasses. And then, well, I won't go on with those two. But the point here, I think, the importance is that this documentation is key to understanding what the CTDL actually is. And again, it is the schema terms link. The ASN for describing competencies has the exact same structure where you've got classes. There are only two kinds of classes actually for describing competencies, a competency framework, the framework document itself, and then the individual competencies that make up that framework. And then a range of properties for describing a competency and the competency framework. So those two, and then there's a how-to with the ASN. So again, those are the schema terms, defining the CTDL terms, the CTDL profile, describing the competency framework terms, and the CTDL profile how-to is kind of a little primer on how to use it, and the CTDL guide gets you back to the guide here. And the thing is that if you look at any one of these, like learning opportunity, it will tell you what we mean by learning opportunity. It will show you an example. It even gives you coding, so that for example you can see this written in. Oops, a little slow. This one is in RDF Turtle. Here's a JSON representation of the data showing you how to use how the learning opportunity profile is used. So this is pretty rich. And from each of these, you can look at the properties and classes that were used in the example, and these links take you back to the tables where these things are defined. So I have a learning opportunity profile has a credit unit type. If I click and go back to credit unit type, I'm a little small here, sorry. Oops, up. Credit unit type, I see that I use a specific control vocabulary, and so there's certificate credit, continuing education unit, degree credit, secondary diploma credit. So it provides you with a lot of data, and these properties and classes at the top of this are what you're mapping to. Classes and properties are what you're mapping to in that second column of the spreadsheet. And Gene, I've only given you, left you with 5 minutes. Okay, I promise you all, I will do a screencast that covers this part in greater detail and make it available. It'll just be a recording. And you can also ask questions about it on the list. So, Gene, you want to just grab it back? And right. Yes.
Sure. Yep. I'm going to grab it back. And thanks, Jordan. I think recording that will actually be very handy, and we could just make it available to everyone, because that would be good, really good information. So I know we threw a lot at everyone. I hope we didn't, cause too much confusion covering all of this. But don't worry, we're going to be there working with you along the way here. And a question came up in the chat about the access to the Crosswalk spreadsheet. Each partner, just ahead of the webinar, will send a link directly to their Google Sheet. You are also invited into a Google group and the Google folder itself, where we'll keep all the materials specifically on these topics that we're talking about today with this group. So all of the materials, PowerPoint presentations, and so forth will also be in that folder. So if anybody has any questions about that, let us know. The PowerPoint, just to make sure everybody does get it directly, we'll also just send a follow-up email and attach it. and it includes a listing of direct links to the information. If you have any trouble getting to anything, let us know. We'll make sure you're re-invited and you have access to it. So our next steps are to begin the analysis and then populate this information. And our timeline is that our next webinar, we had originally wanted to do it the Thursday before the 18th, but the Credential Engine board meeting is actually the day before, and we'll all be in DC. So we moved it to the following Tuesday. But what we want to do is be able to work with all the partners that joined today to help complete the crosswalk process by April 7th. So that gives us a little bit of time, but we'll be following up with everyone, and seeing if we need to do any, one-on-one sessions to, move those forward. And then our next webinar after the April date will be in June. So we're not intending to just have a whole bunch of, webinars with everyone to take up your time, but in between as needed, we'll want to be able to get with you. So we want you to know that we're going to be available to do that. And in addition to the wrap-up webinar, we do have a TAC meeting, a Technical Advisory Committee meeting every month. As a matter of fact, our next meeting is tomorrow morning, actually. And these are some meetings that are already on the calendar, and the April and May meeting, we will have this topic on the agenda, and we will ask, if not all of you to join, some of you to join to help us kind of talk about this with the Technical Advisory Committee to keep them in the loop as well. So that is the timeline. My contact information is included. And Scarlett, you'll see an email coming from Scarlett as well after this, making sure that everybody has access, everybody has the PowerPoint, everybody has additional contacts, and not just me. And we'll kind of just reiterate the next steps. So before we all get about our day, does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, well, good. Thanks again for joining. Thanks to the team members who were able to join as well. Did any of the team members have any closing remarks before we close the meeting?